that building. And then in the basement, they had a courtroom and a 9-cell jail. So it was a one-stop shop. You could enroll your kids in school, pay a parking ticket, get married, bail your husband out of jail, have him thrown in jail. Whatever you needed to do, you could do it in that building. When French settlers first came to this area, one of the first things they wanted to do was establish a school. So we're going to be making a right-hand turn up ahead. And on the left-hand side of the trolley is a large stone building. It is the University of St. Boniface. It is a very large French-speaking university. Now it has had a number of famous graduates over the years, but none more famous than the founding father of Manitoba, Louis Riel himself. Now I'm going to do a little history lesson, but if you take a look over to the left, through the trees you can see 2 half-moon concrete pillars. Now in the middle of those 2 half-moon concrete pillars, you'll see a set of legs. That was the original statue of Louis Riel. It was originally placed just off the ground behind our legislative building to honor Louis Riel. And it was controversial right from the start. People thought the statue was appalling because all you can recognize is his head. Everything from his shoulders down is abstract, his body is abstract, it looks like he's been tortured. So they wanted the statue torn down. Everybody hated it. The government didn't want to tear it down, but they agreed to limit its exposure. So they put those 2 half-moon concrete pillars around it. And then over time, they decided to commission a new statue. And later on in the tour, I'm going to show you the new statue. So they moved the old one down here because he graduated from this university. So that's not the history lesson. We're going to get to the history lesson in about a minute from now. But since 1818, there have been 5 churches and cathedrals built on this site coming up onto the left. What you're looking at here is actually the ruins of the 5th cathedral and the 4th cathedral built in and around the ruins. This back part here is part of the old cathedral. This lower section with the brown steel roof is the new 5th cathedral. It opened in 1972. And then you've got the side walls and the front facade of the old cathedral. The old cathedral was built in 1906, but it actually caught fire and burnt to the ground in 1968. They tried to save as much of it as they could. It was very important to the church that they save the front facade because, one, it's a beautiful piece of architecture, but there are actually 5 bishops buried within that front wall itself. So it was very important to the church. Once we move up, you will be able to, I'm going to be turning the corner, you'll be able to see the front of the old cathedral. And there's a large round circle in there. It used to house a magnificent stained glass window called the Rose Window. When the 4th cathedral caught on fire, the heat buildup in the cathedral was so great that when that stained glass window finally blew out, they found pieces of colored stained glass in and around the Forks Market. So you can just imagine how much force had to be built up in that cathedral in order to make that glass fly that far. That round circle is actually big enough that this trolley will fit through. Now for our first history lesson. In 1870, Canada ended at the Ontario border. Manitoba was not part of Canada yet. Ottawa had sent land surveyors out to this area, and these land surveyors started dividing up this land, giving it to immigrant farmers coming in from out east. What they failed to realize was there were people living on this land, the Métis people, and they didn't appreciate the fact that their farms were being taken away from them. So the Métis people elected Louis Riel as their spokesperson to negotiate with Ottawa to see what agreements they could come up with. So in 1870, Louis Riel started talking with Ottawa, and it was agreed that the Métis people could keep their land, Manitoba would become Canada's 5th province, And I'm sure it was written this way, but everybody was supposed to live happily ever after. That didn't happen. 15 years later, Louis Riel felt that Ottawa wasn't honoring the commitments that it had made to the Métis people, so he led a revolution against Ottawa. He was branded a traitor, he was tried for treason, he was executed. His remains were brought back here. If you take a look over to the left, you can see his final resting place. Well, from here, I think you can see a Harley Davidson sweatshirt. There you go. You can see his final resting place. The kicker to this was, it was the testimony of Louis Riel's cousin that got him convicted and found guilty. Louis Riel is the only man in Canadian history ever to be tried for treason, charged with treason, found guilty, and executed in Canada's history. So thousands and thousands of people, he was a traitor. Thousands and thousands more, he was considered to be a hero. On the books now, he is considered to be a hero. He is known as the father of Manitoba. He is the one man that stood up to the federal government to make sure that they honored the commitments that it had made to its native people. Once we get to this intersection, if you take a look across the river, you can see the back part of the Human Rights Museum, all that stone. You can see the glass tower. You can see all those windows. Once we turn the corner, if you take a look to the left, you will see the front of the old cathedral and that large round circle. Then if you take a look to the right, you will see a promenade walkway that starts on the Red River and switches to the Assiniboine River. Then you will actually see where the Assiniboine River empties into the Red River just ahead of us and to the right. At that point, I ask you to take a look back on the left-hand side of the trolley, because you will see a bust of Louis Riel with the dates 1844, 1885. So there's the promenade walkway. Then it switches to the Assiniboine River. That's where the Assiniboine empties into the Red. That promenade walkway continues. And then over to the left, you can see this bust of Louis Riel with the dates 1844, 1885 right here. Directly in behind that bust, you see that round, that white building with green trim. That is the oldest building in Winnipeg. It was built between 1846 and 1852. It served as a hospital. It served as an insane asylum. It served as an orphanage. It is now the St. Boniface Museum. It's a wonderful place to go and learn about some of our French history. I just pulled over to let that car pass. Over to the left, you can see La Vérendrye Park. It was named after Pierre La Vérendrye. He was a French fur trader and explorer. He opened up the very, very first French-speaking settlement, trading post in this area, called it Fort Rouge. These have to be part of the new wing of the hospital that they are modular getting ready to install. This is the oldest hospital in Western Canada. It originally began as a tiny log cabin with 4 beds run by the Grey Nuns in 1871. It has developed to the point where it is the second largest hospital in Winnipeg. They have over 850 beds, and as you can see, they're getting bigger as we speak. They are considered to be the best hospital for any type of heart surgery in the province of Manitoba. Now, when you had Winnipeg on one side of the city, and you had St. Boniface on the other, on one side of the river, and St. Boniface on the other side of the river, you had two cities really, really close together. They were friendly, but they were rivalry. There was some rivalry between them. So whenever one city accomplished something before the other one, they liked to sort of show it off, rub their nose in the other city's accomplishments. So in 1911, the city of St. Boniface completed their sewer system, their water and waste system, before the city of Winnipeg did. And they wanted to celebrate. They wanted to have a great big banquet. They invited all the politicians over from Winnipeg into St. Boniface for this great big banquet. Would anybody like to guess where they held the banquet? Inside their newly completed sewer system, before it was turned on for the very first time. It was a one-time use venue. I've got a book at home that shows about 8 or 10 pictures, and it's a big round concrete sewer. But they had dining room tables down there. People were dressed in tuxedos and ball gowns. They had live entertainment. It was beautiful. but I don't know, just the fear of somebody up top flipping a switch by mistake and turning it on didn't appeal to me. So that's a little bit of the history of St. Boniface. Now, we're going to be going over into Winnipeg. I feel like I should talk about that bus shack. I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to draw attention to it. But I'll give you a little bit of a... Homeless people a lot of times use those bus shacks to live in. Now, all the windows were broken out of that thing so many times the city stopped fixing it. So the homeless people were trying to put up curtains. The problem that we're having in this city, as well as other cities in Canada, Ottawa has established a catch and release program. They arrest these people, and before the police actually have time to file the paperwork, they're back out on the street. So it's a lose-lose situation. It exists. The police basically have their hands tied. There's nothing that they can do about it. The people are frustrated. The people that live in this city are frustrated because they're forced to stand outside of the bus shacks, some of the bus shacks, even in the rain, and something has to change. And I know this is like this in other cities, and it's like it in the United States as well. Things have just gotten way, way, way out of hand. We were at the Forks Market. There was a large stone fort around there, right behind the Fort Garry Hotel. It was called Upper Fort Garry. It was run by the Hudson Bay Company. So all the activity in the city was happening around there. Well, a young man by the name of Henry McKinney came to this area. He was a bit of an entrepreneur. He was a bit of a loner. He wanted to open up a business, but he didn't want to be under the thumb of the Hudson Bay Company. So he opened up a business essentially where the intersection of Portage and Main is, hence Broken Glass right there. He opened up a business at the intersection or around the intersection of Portage and Main. His business was so significant that people started building around his business and not around the forts. He opened up the very first bar in Western Canada in 1859. By 1861, a community had formed around McKinney's bar. That community was called, anybody? Winnipeg. Winnipeg is going to be the answer to a lot of the questions on this tour today. Just a bit of a heads up. This is the Red River. So in 1861, the community was formed, Winnipeg was formed. By 1864, Winnipeg was granted city status. And then by 1867, Winnipeg had a reputation for being the wickedest city in Canada. Now that's something that needs to go on a t-shirt. Like, we're the Slurpee capital of Canada, but to be the wickedest city in Canada, I'm sure we'll sell 1 million of those t-shirts. We are essentially in between the two rivers right now. We are in a low-lying area. That is the Red River. This is the Assiniboine River. Once we get on top of the bridge, if you take a look to the right, you will see the Forks Marina, you will see the Promenade Walkway, and you will see where the Assiniboine empties into the Red.
Ayan o, tinan mo. So, did you see the homeless?
Island right here. Absolutely.
Did you see that? The homeless over there. Homeless. Wawa naman. Mukhang nakadrops.
Now our promenade walkway is usable on average 10 months out of the year. During high water levels, it floods and it's got about 10 feet of water above it. So we have to wait until the water levels go down before we can use it. Directly to the right is the Forks Market. On the other side of those train tracks, that's where the Forks Market is. Directly on the left, where that rust-colored wall is, that's where Upper Fort Garry used to stand. Upper Fort Garry used to take up 3/4, maybe a little bit more of Main Street here. Main Street didn't exist. There was a large stone fort here, and it was called Upper Fort Garry. It was run by the Hudson Bay Company. All the raised flower beds that you see, would depict where there were buildings inside the fort. If you come down here at night, that back wall has a light show on it, and it plays for about 15 minutes. It depicts the history of Hudson Bay Company and Manitoba. Then it stops and then it resets and it starts over again. The only thing from the old stone fort that still exists is that gate right there. It's called the Governor's Gate, and then it's got two wooden walls. Those wooden walls used to be covered in stone as well. Lower Fort Garry still stands approximately 25 kilometers north of here, and it is the only stone fort from the fur trade era still in existence in North America. Now, have any of you ever been to New York City? Have you ever gone in through Grand Central Station? If you have a chance, this is our Via Rail train station. Go through our Via Rail train station. Our train station was built in 1912, and it was designed by the same architects that designed Grand Central Station in New York City. Our train station was actually built first, and it was a test project for those architects. So essentially we have a miniaturized version of the train station in the Big Apple. It has changed drastically over the years. This front section here and the other front section on the other side of the main entranceway used to be filled up with retail shops and services. You would be able to get something to eat at a restaurant, get your hair cut, get a massage, or a back rub, sit in fancy leather chairs waiting for your train to arrive. But the design, that's all shut down. That has been converted to offices, but the back part and the dome, it's all the same as what you would have found in New York City. Now, moments ago I told you that in 1876, Winnipeg had developed a reputation for being the wickedest city in Canada. And that was hurting us. Because in 1876, the Canadian Pacific Railway was looking at a city in Manitoba to place its rail lines. We didn't have the train yet. And they were actually leaning towards a city called Selkirk because they didn't like the reputation that Winnipeg had. But the Winnipeggers knew that whatever city got the train, they would become the most powerful urban center in the province. So they did what anybody does when they want something really, really badly. They bribed the Canadian Pacific Railway. They offered them free land for their railway and promised that it would be tax-free forever. So whatever land they were given in 1876, they got for free, and to this day they have still not paid any tax on it. So the Canadian Pacific Railway announced that they would be coming to Winnipeg, and they started installing train tracks. And by 1881, we were experiencing our first economic boom. We were going from a collection of ramshackle wooden shacks to ever-impressive more brick structures. If you take a look over to the left, this rundown white building, and then the beige building next to it. All three, this big beige building is actually two buildings that were joined together. But all three of these buildings were built in 1881, when we were going from that collection of ramshackle wooden shacks to ever-impressive more brick structures. We were growing faster than any other Canadian city. We were destined to become number one. We had more millionaires per capita than any other city in Canada. By 1911, we were the third largest city in the country. We were only behind Toronto and Montreal. And then two things happened. World War I broke out in 1914, and a lot of the people that were developing our city went back home overseas to fight in the war effort. And the other thing that happened, we established ourselves as a major rail transportation hub because we're right in the middle of the country, so everything was going through our city by train. But then the Panama Canal opened, and it was cheaper to ship goods by boat than it was by train. So then a small little port city on BC's coast named Vancouver took our spot, and we've sunk ever since. I think we're about 7th now. But we established the Canadian Grain Commission building. We also established the Canadian Grain Exchange building. This is the Commission building. art is very subjective, but that monument that you see there, it is supposed to represent the wheat fields of the Canadian prairie. I look at that, I do not see wheat fields of the Canadian prairie. I see one big orchid snowplow. Now, we probably move more snow in this city than any other city in Canada, so I guess both could be said are true. If you take a look over to the left, you can see this roof line. A big tall building, that's the new tallest building back there, the newest skyscraper, residential tower. But the roof line that you're looking at is actually the roof of an underground shopping center. The shops of Winnipeg Square. Our Portage and Main intersection, it is, you cannot cross this intersection above ground. You have to go underground in order to cross the street. So all of these buildings are connected by an underground concourse. And then that concourse is connected to an underground shopping center, the shops of Winnipeg Square. Portage and Main, windiest intersection in Canada, coldest intersection in Canada.
Ilalim.
I'm going to talk about that Bank of Montreal a little bit later on, probably about 5 minutes from now. But I want to talk about that statue right there.
Parking mahirap doon.
That
Saan tayo
statue was
magpa-park?
commissioned by the Bank of Montreal. They wanted to commemorate and honor the different bank employees that fought during the war. Now, they hired an American sculptor to do the work, and he did a beautiful job. Don't get me wrong, it's a beautiful statue. He actually used the face of a real Canadian bank employee as the model for that statue. But he did make one mistake. He put that Canadian's face onto an American soldier's uniform. So he has been inappropriately dressed all these years because we are Canadian. So we probably apologized to the American sculptor for his mistake. And we probably said, you know, if you give us a discount, we'll keep the statue. So that's why we've had this inappropriately dressed soldier all these years. Now, Portage and Main, windiest intersection in Canada, coldest intersection in Canada. We're going to touch on our weather in Winnipeg later on in the tour, but we can get extremely cold weather where exposed skin will freeze in less than a minute. We are heading to my favorite part of the city. We are heading into the Exchange District. The Exchange District is actually made up of 150 buildings, all built between 1880 and 1920, making it the largest collection of turn-of-the-century architecture found anywhere in North America. For that reason, we attract a lot of movie companies. They come to Winnipeg to film in the Exchange District because we can double for any city you want us to. We have doubled for New York City. We have doubled for Chicago. We can even double for Winnipeg in a pinch. We've played an 1880s Western town for a Brad Pitt film, The Assassination of Jesse James by the coward Robert Ford. There have been over 100 movies filmed in and around our Exchange District. So that's why we are so desperate to try and change the designation. We are a National Historic Site, but there's a protected designation and a non-protected designation. We are a non-protected designation, and what that means is this building, part of this building is for lease, but if this building were to go up for sale, somebody could buy this building, they could tear it down, they could put up a 30-story skyscraper, and nobody could touch it. Nobody could say anything. If it was a protected site, you could still buy the building, you could modify the outside of the inside of the building, but not touch the outside. And it's the outside that we're trying to preserve. That's what keeps the movie companies coming to Winnipeg. This big building here that we're traveling beside right now, this belonged to one of Winnipeg's first millionaires, J. Ashdown. He was a hardware merchant. He had a series of hardware stores across the country. Directly in front of us through the front window, that reddish brick building, it is now called the McKim building, but that used to be one of Jay Ashdown's hardware store. When he passed away, he left behind the largest collection of hardware stores in the entire British Empire. If he didn't have it in the store, he had it in the warehouse. So his warehouse was used as a distribution center to stock all the different retail stores. The building was converted to condominiums probably about 30 years ago. Great big 14-foot high ceilings, beautiful wide open spaces. They were beautiful condos when they first opened up. When they first opened up, they were about $60,000. Now, some of them could go over $300,000. Have any of you ever heard of the Winnipeg General Strike?
No.
Winnipeg General Strike happened in 1919. 35,000 workers walked off their job here in Winnipeg. They demanded better working conditions, higher wages, 2-day weekends, safer work environment, things like that. They were protesting down Main Street, and the government didn't like it, so they called in the police. The police were supposed to get these protesters to go home. That was unsuccessful. So then the military were called. The military showed up on horseback. As they tried getting the people to go home, they were riding through the crowd, pushing them and shoving them, trying to get them to go home. And the people just separated, let the horses go through, and continued on with their protest. The military went through a second time a little bit faster, the same thing happened. Now the military's got a job to do, we gotta get these people to go home. So they went through a third time. This time they had their weapons drawn and they hit the crowd at full gallop. They were running over people, they were shooting people. 2 people died instantly, several other people died from their injuries in the hospital. The crowd dispersed. They started running through the rest of the Exchange District, where they were then pounced upon by the Winnipeg police, who beat them with nightsticks and clubs. 4 days later, the Winnipeg General Strike was called off because the protesters felt they could no longer fight the city that was under police and military occupation. The strike goes down in the history books as the largest labor uprising in Canada's history. It is still debated whether or not the strike actually accomplished what it was set out to do. But now this is where it gets wonky. Some of the organizers of that strike were sent to jail. While they were in jail, they were elected to government office. While they were in jail and at government office jobs, they proceeded to fight for better working conditions, higher wages, 2-day weekends, and they got everything that they were after while they were in jail. So did the strike accomplish what they were after, or did those organizers actually get what they were after? So, we got everything that we were after, but at what cost? The cost of human life, if you factor that in, it was a high price to pay. Now we're going to turn the corner, and if you ever Google Winnipeg General Strike, one of the first things you're going to see is a group of people trying to rock an old streetcar. They're trying to tip it over. The old streetcars were made entirely of wood, and they ran on rails. So the only thing metal on them were the wheels. So around the corner, there is a monument to the Winnipeg General Strike. It's a replica of the old streetcars, leaning on its side, and it's made out of metal. It's all rusted and it's brown. It's supposed to look like it's burnt wood because they set it on fire. They couldn't tip it over, so they set it on fire. And then in the evening, that monument is lit up with a red light on the inside to make it look like it is still burning. So that is what the old streetcars, trolley cars used to look like. This is the closest facsimile that we could get to those old streetcars. They were a little bit longer, a little bit sleeker, more rounded. They used to have square windows. Now this one originally came with domed windows, but we took out most of those domed windows and we put in those big picture windows for better visibility. And now we have the option of taking the windows out and we can have an open air trolley if we want. We make that available for weddings. if they want an open trolley for weddings, but we tell them, the one thing they say about Winnipeg, if you don't like the weather, wait 10 minutes. So if you want an open air trolley, we take them out the night before, they don't travel with us. And on the day of your wedding, if it's pouring rain, you're going to be sitting in a swimming pool. So we've only had the windows out once. This is our Centennial Concert Hall. It is said to be one of the 7th best acoustically designed
Look at the window,
concert halls in North America. Then next to it, you have a green dome. It is supposed to be a green dome, those aren't called for panels. That is our planetarium. And then next to it, you have the Manitoba Museum. It used to be the Museum of Man and Nature, but they changed their name. It made international history in 2011 when a young pop star by the name of Justin Bieber was in the city. And he wanted to impress his girlfriend at the time, Selena Gomez. So he rented the museum. And they had a nice romantic dinner catered on board a replica of a 16th century British sailing vessel called the Namasyal in the back of this museum. And then the next day they went and adopted a puppy named Baylor. If you would like to relive that experience, I'm pleased to tell you that you can. First off, it'll cost you about $5,000. You would have to bring your own feeder or your own Gomez. And then a puppy adoption the next day will cost you about $200. We are in the cultural district of Winnipeg. There are a number of theaters in this area for live entertainment, live plays. The Manitoba Theatre Centre directly in front of us. Their season starts in September, runs throughout the course of the winter. It's founded by those two gentlemen out front in statue form, Tom Henry and John Hirsch. If you wanted to get season tickets, they normally put on about five to six plays a season. And to get season tickets on a Monday night, which is the cheapest night you can go, will probably run you about $185 for the entire season. That's not one play, that's the entire season. So that's very, very reasonably priced. Have any of you ever seen America's Got Talent or Canada's Got Talent? It's a variety show. And essentially that variety show is exactly the same as what vaudeville used to be. Over to the left is the Pantages Playhouse. Pantages theaters were right across the country and even in the United States. This was a very, very small venue. It was again a training ground for up-and-coming talent. They were told that arts that started here, they were told, if you cannot keep the people from Winnipeg entertained, then you are not good enough to move up to a bigger venue. So, a lot of the acts that started here never went any further. They were given a train ticket and told to go home and practice their craft. The building directly in front of us is our City Hall. This is actually Winnipeg's 3rd City Hall. What can I say? It's still standing. It's not pretty. It's nothing fancy to look at. If you Google Gingerbread City Hall, you will come up with a Gingerbread City Hall. Our second one, it looked like a gingerbread castle. It was gorgeous. This tall building coming up on the right, for a matter of 6 weeks, this was Canada's very first skyscraper. It was the tallest building in Canada for 6 weeks. We are now on Main Street. This section of Main Street used to be known as Bankers Row. There were 39 different financial institutions along this stretch of Main Street. They had big columns out front to make them look impressive, so you would be impressed and you would want to put your money in the bank. But there was none more opulent than the Bank of Montreal, right on the corner of Portage and Main. 6 big columns out front. If you go inside the building, it was all made up of marble imported from Italy. The walls, the floors, the teller's cages were all marble. The ceiling was appraised at over $3 million. They had gold leaf on the ceiling. It is no longer a functioning bank. It is owned by the Manitoba Métis Federation. But if you look around the second floor, there are square windows. They promoted